My stepmother falsely accused me of trying to make advances toward her, all to take away my inheritance from my father. My dad believed her and cut ties with me, but 10 years later, he learned the truth. My biological parents got divorced when I was 8, and they agreed to share custody of me. So I spent 5 days a week with my mom because she lived close to my school, and the weekends were with my dad. Despite the divorce, my parents always treated me well. Although I felt sad about their separation, I understood they still loved me, regardless of their relationship. A couple of years later, my dad met my stepmother, Sarah. When he first introduced her to me, I was 10. She seemed really sweet, and my dad appeared happy, hoping that we would get along. She had twin daughters, Lily and Grace, who were 13 at the time. Their father had abandoned them right after they were born, and Sarah raised them on her own. Because of this, the girls were rather immature for their age and would throw tantrums in public if Sarah and my dad didn't buy them what they wanted or if things didn't go their way. I was an introvert and the complete opposite of them, so I just quietly observed their antics. After a year of dating, Sarah and my dad decided to get married. I was 11 at the time, and even my mom attended their wedding. I was happy that our family was growing. I thought my relationship with my stepmother was fine, but little did I know that ignorance would last only a few months after their honeymoon. One morning, when we were alone, she told me that she didn't like me and that we just needed to pretend we got along when my dad was around. Then, she said that when my dad wasn't around, I shouldn't bother her because she hated even seeing my face, which reminded her too much of my mom. My little heart broke at her harsh words. I didn't expect to hear that from her. I actually liked her, and I thought we would have a good relationship, but sadly, she didn't feel the same way. Of course, the twins overheard, and soon after, they started bullying me, saying I didn't have a real father and that my dad loved them more than me. I remember crying and telling my mom about it. She immediately called my dad and gave him an earful. Dad assured her that Sarah couldn't have said anything like that and that I probably misunderstood her. The next weekend, when I went to see my dad, Sarah looked upset. She didn't say a word while my dad was around, but as soon as he left, she whispered viciously that she would do everything to make sure I'd never have a father again if I ever told my mom anything about her. She also threatened to divorce my dad, take all his money, and told me if I didn't want to see my dad on the streets, I should keep quiet. I was only 11, and I was terrified for my dad, so I just nodded in agreement. From that day on, Sarah made it her mission to turn my life into a living nightmare. I was just a kid, and I thought I had to silently endure it. When we were alone, she would say awful things to me, and I stayed quiet, praying she would stop tormenting me. She mocked my height and weight, called me ugly. I hoped my dad would notice, but he never did. What's worse, he thought Sarah and I had a good relationship and would make me go shopping or eat out with her and the twins. She'd take my dad's credit card to pay for our restaurant meals but wouldn't let me eat anything. I was only allowed to order soup or dessert, not a main course. I'd sit there, sadly watching them finish their meals, quietly crying, then go home hungry. She made me go to bed on an empty stomach. There were so many nights I cried myself to sleep, hungry and exhausted from her hatred toward me. By then, I was on the edge. I was scared, angry, and disappointed in both Sarah and my dad. Because of this, I started dreading weekends with my dad. When Friday came, I would look for any excuse to stay at my mom's, like saying I had a stomachache. Of course, my parents started noticing, and my dad would call, telling me how sad he was that he didn't get to see me. My mom tried to persuade me to tell her what was going on, but I stayed silent, still afraid of Sarah's threats. When I was 14, my dad decided to take the whole family, including me, on a trip to Turkey. At first, I didn't want to go, but my mom said it would be a great chance for me to see the world. Reluctantly, I agreed. As usual, Sarah pretended to be kind and caring in front of my dad, hugging me and asking about my school, as if she really cared about my life. I started noticing that she would subtly mock me with her sweet voice. It was hurtful, but at the same time, it didn't seem outright mean. For example, when I talked about playing basketball, she joked that I needed to be taller if I wanted to play that sport, even though I was quite tall for my age. Then she'd say I should focus more on studying if I wanted to achieve anything in life. The twins would smirk and call me a fool, even though my grades were better than theirs. Dad noticed this, but chose to ignore it. When I told him that her words hurt me, he insisted that Sarah was just joking, and that I needed to take it easier. Sarah nodded and added that I had no sense of humor and that I should learn to have fun the way she did. This continued throughout the whole trip. One day, in a fit of anger, when she and the twins were teasing me again about my weight while I was trying to enjoy the pool, I decided to get back at them. I directly told the twins that both of them had double chins, which looked ridiculous, and I watched as their faces turned dark with hurt. Then, I turned to Sarah and told her that she shouldn't wear a cover-up over her bikini, because her huge belly was still visible, and it made her look like a penguin. I saw Sarah's face turn red with embarrassment, and she quickly ran to our hotel room. The twins started yelling at me, accusing me of sexism and saying I was terrible. Later, they told my dad everything, and he came to talk to me, clearly angry. He asked if I had really said those things about my stepmother and the twins, and when I nodded, he started scolding me, saying that he had raised me better than that and that I should never say such things about a woman's appearance. I argued that they were the ones who always made comments about my weight, looks, and height, but my dad insisted I apologize to Sarah, who, as it turned out, had locked herself in the bathroom and was crying after my words. Sarah and the twins staged a whole show, dramatically accepting my apology. When I got home, I, of course, told my mom everything. She spoke to my dad again, who tried to put all the blame on me. But my mom threatened that if Sarah ever made comments about my weight or appearance again, she would contact the authorities. This seemed to wake my dad up, and strangely enough, Sarah never said anything like that to me again. Of course, she and the twins made a point of ignoring me whenever my dad wasn't around, but honestly, I didn't mind. When I was 16, my mom went away for a few days, and I had to stay with my dad and Sarah. For several days, Sarah complained to my dad about how tired she was of cooking for yet another person. On the last day of my stay, I decided to cook dinner myself since my mom had taught me how to cook from a young age so I could be independent. When Sarah found out I was cooking, she said she wanted to invite a few of her friends over. I cooked, set the table, and served dinner to everyone. It seemed like everyone enjoyed the food, and I even got compliments. Later, my dad decided to do the dishes, and I went in my room. That's when I heard Sarah and her friends talking loudly outside my window. Her friends were talking about how lucky she was to have such a good husband and a beautiful home. When they mentioned how great it was that I had cooked for them, Sarah immediately started complaining about how annoying I was and how disgusted she was to even look at me. She told her friends she couldn't wait until I turned 18 so she wouldn't have to see me every weekend anymore. When one of her friends mentioned again that I had made a good impression, Sarah replied that, in fact, she had expected me to fail and hoped I would ruin the dish so she'd have a reason to laugh at me. I was shocked by this because I had been trying to be polite with her, even though I knew she hated me. But it seemed like she had already made up her mind and wasn't going to change it. Over time, her hatred for me only grew. When I went to college, I would occasionally visit my dad for a few days at his insistence, but even then, Sarah completely ignored me. She would deliberately plan family events with my dad and the twins so that I was often left home alone. Every time I woke up late, because it was my break, she would yell at me, calling me a disgrace. She would say I was lazy and inattentive if I left any mess behind, even though I always cleaned up after myself. I knew for sure that I had always been respectful to her because my dad would have given me a talking to if I hadn't. I was incredibly polite with her, trying not to say or do anything that might upset her. But it always felt like I was doing something wrong. Moreover, she had absolutely no respect for my personal space. She would barge into my room while I was sleeping to wake me up or enter without knocking, which made me feel incredibly uncomfortable. Sometimes, she would even peek into my room or under my bed for no reason. She refused to buy dinner for me, even though she would buy it for the whole family and wouldn't even call me to the table. Despite all this, I kept my mouth shut, kept my head down, and tried to spend time with my dad whenever I could. Now, let's get to the main event. When I turned 20, my dad asked me to come over to his place. He said he had important news to share. I hadn't visited him in a while, so I felt a bit nervous, but my mom convinced me to go, saying he had good news for me. I agreed and bought the tickets. When I arrived, my dad greeted me warmly at the airport, and we went in his house. I asked what he wanted to tell me, but he reassured me that he'd reveal everything at the family dinner. When we got there, I noticed the twins were also at the house, and I hadn't seen them in a long time. Lily and Grace didn't even bother to look at me, and I ignored them too. That evening, during the family dinner, my dad began talking about how proud he was to have 3 wonderful children. He talked about how grateful he was for such a loving family and that he wanted to share some exciting news. The atmosphere felt positive, and I couldn't help but feel a sense of anticipation for something good. While my dad continued speaking, he looked at each of us with a smile, including Sarah, who had been giving me icy glares all day. Dad went on, explaining that he had recently lost a friend to a heart attack. It had been a serious reminder for him about how lucky he was to have all of us. He also mentioned that he had spoken with a lawyer and had written a will. Hearing the word, will, I noticed how Sarah and the twins instantly perked up. Dad continued, saying that he had thought everything through carefully and decided to leave the house to Sarah because she was his wife. Sarah smiled proudly and kissed him on the cheek. The house had 5 bedrooms, and if Sarah decided to sell it, she could get quite a fortune. Then my dad said that he had decided to leave me his entire pension account and his car. But his car wasn't just any car, it was a vintage vehicle that he had invested a lot of money and time into. This car had sentimental value for both of us, as he often told stories about his youth and the adventures he had with it. I sat there, processing this information, and realized that by leaving me the car, my dad was expressing his love for me. As my dad started talking about how proud he was to pass the car on to me, Sarah's expression shifted from pride to discontent. She exchanged glances with the twins, who seemed just as upset. It was obvious that the thought of me inheriting a significant amount of money in the expensive vintage car made them both envious and resentful. My dad, seemingly unaware of the tension in the room, continued and said that he planned to leave the twins a joint bank account he had shared with Sarah. Sarah was a stay-at-home mom, so all the money in that account belonged solely to my dad. He added that he wanted those funds to be divided equally between the twins. He reassured them that they would have both money and a house to live in peacefully, with nothing to worry about if something were to happen to him. I completely agreed with this decision. It seemed fair to me for everyone. However, the twins immediately expressed their dissatisfaction. They said they had expected more, that my dad should have left them the pension account as well, since I didn't even need it. When my dad asked why they felt that way, Sarah started saying that I was a man and therefore should find my own way in life, while they were women and would need more money for financial stability. Dad reminded Sarah that he had already set up college funds for her kids, and now they were going to receive the house and the bank account, so they had nothing to worry about. Sarah kept insisting that I didn't deserve such money, but my dad firmly stated that his decision was final. I sat quietly, listening to their argument. Suddenly, out of nowhere, Sarah broke into tears. My dad and I looked at each other in concern, and he said that there was no reason for tears because everything had been divided fairly. Through her sobs, Sarah began to say that she had kept quiet all these years to protect the family, but she could no longer bear it. An uncomfortable silence filled the room, and my dad and I exchanged confused looks. Despite the tension, my dad gently asked Sarah to explain what was bothering her. Sobbing, Sarah began to claim that for several years, I had allegedly had inappropriate intentions toward her, but she had decided to keep it quiet to protect me. I was stunned by this sudden accusation. Before I could process what was happening, Sarah began to describe her false allegations in detail. She told my dad that after our trip to Turkey, where we had argued about weight and height, I supposedly started staring at her constantly and tried to sneak into her bedroom without invitation. I froze in my chair as she continued fabricating a story about how I allegedly tried to break into the bathroom every time she took a shower or got too close to her when we were alone. She told my dad that every weekend, she was scared of my presence in the house because she feared I might do the same thing to the twins. I tried to defend myself, vehemently denying these baseless accusations and yelling at her for daring to make up such lies. But Sarah kept crying, playing the victim. She claimed that as I grew older, I scared her more and more, and once, when we were alone, I supposedly tried to make advances toward her. My eyes widened in shock, and the blood drained from my face when I heard this serious accusation. My dad looked confused and worried, his gaze darting between me and Sarah, clearly unsure of what to think. Sarah kept telling her lies, claiming she had silently suffered for years, afraid to speak out for the sake of the family. I screamed at Sarah, calling her a psychopath because there was no way I would ever look at her inappropriately, let alone touch her. Sarah screamed back, saying she would no longer remain silent and had to expose the monster she called me. The twins started shouting at me with fury, accusing me of making their mother go through all of this. They called me names like rapist and pervert. My head was spinning, and it all felt like a terrible nightmare. I couldn't believe how a pleasant evening had turned into a flood of wild accusations against me. I looked at my dad, hoping for support, but he remained silent, clearly trying to process everything Sarah had said. He asked her if what she was saying was true, and Sarah nodded, claiming she would never lie to him about his own son, and that, as his wife, she deserved his trust. While I tried to defend myself, My dad asked her again why she hadn't told him about this earlier. Sarah said she had been afraid no one would believe her since I was a minor who allegedly tried to do something inappropriate. She insisted that no one would have taken her words seriously. She added that she had silently endured it all for the sake of the family. By this point, I was crying, begging my dad not to believe her. I could never have imagined that Sarah would stoop so low as to invent such terrible things, even after all the years she had tormented me. Unfortunately, Sarah's manipulation destroyed my relationship with my dad, who seemed torn between trusting me or believing the woman he had married. The twins, influenced by their mother's story, supported Sarah's false accusations and yelled at me to get out of their house. I shouted back that this was my dad's house, and they shouldn't believe their mother's words because they were lies. My dad sat in silence. Then he looked up at me and said that I needed to leave the house while he figured things out. It felt like a punch to the stomach, being rejected by my own father, who believed his second wife over his own son. Hurt, confused, and betrayed, I packed my things and left the house I had once considered my own. I immediately flew to my mom's, who was shocked to see me at her door. When I told her everything, she was furious and ready to confront Sarah. But I begged her not to, as there was no telling how far Sarah's psychopathy could go. If she could come up with such insane accusations just to kick me out of my dad's house because she was upset that I would inherit something, she could easily fabricate even more lies to destroy my life. I couldn't risk it, so I decided to cut ties with my dad permanently. If he chose to believe her, then he didn't deserve to be a part of my life. Later, my mom told me that my dad had called her and said he was ashamed to have such a son, and that he didn't want anything to do with me anymore. My mom tried to defend me, but her words were ignored. She also faced condemnation from my dad's side of the family, who believed Sarah's story and claimed that my mom had raised a pervert. I can't even imagine how painful it must have been for my mom to hear those words about her own son. Clearly, the damage was done, and Sarah had won. I wish I could say that my life improved after I cut ties with them, but that wasn't the case. Sarah and the twins continued bombarding me with abusive messages, threatening me to stay away from my dad. It went so far that I had to change my phone number just to escape from them. Even after that, my life didn't get any better because after what Sarah had done, I started fearing being around women. I was scared that I would be falsely accused again, and that would ruin my career and life. I was afraid to meet anyone or go on dates. All this time, my mom was there for me and believed in me. I went through a deep depression, and my mom flew in to stay with me for a couple of months to support me. Gradually, my mental state began to heal, and I started living again. Eventually, I met an amazing woman named Sophia, who brought light into my life. She completely changed my life, and my mom loves her too. My mom and Sophia are everything to me, and because of them, I found a new purpose to live. A week ago, I received a call from an unknown number. Thinking it might be from Amazon, I answered. To my shock, I heard my dad's voice. I was stunned, as it had been almost 10 years since I'd last heard from him. His voice sounded old. I asked how he got my new number, since only a few family members knew it, but he avoided answering and asked how I was doing. I stayed silent, then told him not to contact me again, as I had nothing to say to him. At that moment, my dad broke down in tears. He begged me to forgive him, repeating how awful he had been to abandon his own son. My curiosity grew, and I waited for him to explain. Then, my dad started telling me that Sarah had been cheating on him with his best friend for years. When he confronted her with the evidence, she didn't even try to deny it anymore and said that she was tired of being married to such a pathetic man. Sarah admitted that she had married him only for his money and that she hated being in a relationship with someone like him. When my dad insisted on the truth, she finally confessed that she had fabricated all those accusations against me because she also hated me and wanted all of my dad's estate to go to her and her daughters, as they, according to her, deserved it. As you can imagine, my dad divorced her, and she got nothing from the marriage, since she had been having an affair. Although her lawyers tried to get alimony, they lost. My dad continued, saying he had been waiting for the moment he could divorce Sarah so he could officially reach out to me and apologize for everything he had put me through. He said he wanted to make up for the lost time and build a better father-son relationship. When he mentioned father and son, I couldn't hold back a smirk. I told him that he was no longer my father after so easily abandoning me because of his wife's vile accusations. I added that I didn't want anything to do with him and that he should stop bothering me. I hung up the phone, hoping he would get the message. However, since then, my dad and his relatives, with whom I don't even speak, have been bombarding me with calls. They say that my dad has suffered enough, and I'm just making his life harder. I feel crushed by these messages. I really wonder if I'm wrong for refusing to talk to my dad after he abandoned me because of Sarah's false accusations. I was a child, and she blackmailed and manipulated me while I stayed silent. I never told anyone about it. I think it's time to open up and share everything with my mom because I know she'll understand me. They already knew something was off with me. I started telling them how my dad contacted me after all these years, which shocked my mom. She asked why he did that, and I explained. She didn't know that he had divorced and was furious about everything Sarah had done to all of us. Then I told them both about how Sarah manipulated me when I was just 11. I told them how she tormented me when my dad wasn't home and threatened to divorce him if I ever told him anything. I didn't realize how traumatic these events were for me until I started slowly recounting each incident one by one. By the time I finished telling everything, tears were streaming down my face. Sophia and my mom were quietly crying too. My mom immediately got up to hug me, repeating that I shouldn't have kept all of that inside, and that it was good that I shared it. I cried for half an hour while my mom continued to hold me. Sophia said no child should ever have to go through that, and that it was perfectly okay if I never wanted to talk to my dad again because he should have protected me better. My mom agreed and said that I didn't owe my dad any explanation because when I needed him most, he chose to believe his wife over me. And the only reason he's trying to contact me now is because he's alone and has no family left. That's when I realized they were probably right. Maybe my dad never truly loved me, because if he really did, and knew who I was, he would have never believed I was capable of such things. Since then, my decision has been final. After that conversation, years later, I felt so much lighter when I told everything I had been through with Sarah, my mom, and Sophia. I blocked my dad and will continue to block any family member who decides to interfere in my life. I owe no one an explanation, especially those who chose to turn their back on me. Wow, I wrote this post 6 months ago, and I can't believe how much my life has changed since then. I want to start with some good news. I proposed to Sophia, and she said, yes. My mom is very happy for us, and we're considering moving closer to her because the schools there are better. We can both work from anywhere, so it makes sense for our future. I've also started therapy, thanks to advice from people. It's helping me feel better little by little. I try to focus on the good things in my life, on Sophia and my mom. They've always been there for me, and I'm grateful for their support. The past was tough, but I'm looking to the future with optimism, free from lies and drama.